Hey guys, it's Arena. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have something very special for you guys. We are starting a new series where I've gathered my mom friends to talk about all aspects of parenting and raising kids in Korea. So welcome guys.
Hi.
So here we have Joyce and Sue. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Joyce. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I've been in Korea for about 14 years. I have a 6-year-old son. And he goes to school with Serena's son.
Yeah.
And we met maybe 5 or 6 years ago at work. And we're also from Toronto. We're both from Toronto.
And we went to the same university.
That's right. Yeah.
And ever since our kids have been going to the same school, we've been seeing each other pretty much every single day. So
That's right, yeah.
We're pretty close now.
Yeah.
So, Sue, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sue. I grew up in England and then I came back to Korea for high school and uni, which is sort of a unique case for most English speakers. So I've experienced the best of both worlds, I think. And my kids are 5 and 3. And I think we sort of bumped into each other a lot at work before, although I'd never actually got to work with you guys.
Yeah.
And then I was out of town for a couple of years, and because I had kids, and Joyce obviously has Ro as well, we sort of became close online, didn't we? Yes. And so here we are today.
Yeah. Sue is also the current host of a radio show called Morning Special on EBS FM. Yeah.
Very nice.
Joyce is an educator here. She's been teaching in Korea for 14 plus years now.
Almost.
Yeah. She's written a lot of textbooks on English education.
That's
too.
right.
Yeah. So this was the first episode, and I thought long and hard about what we would talk about today. And I thought it would be nice to maybe first start off by defining who the Korean mom is. So where I got that idea was from a book that I read called Bringing Up Bebe. Have you guys read the book?
Yes.
I have.
Yeah? Okay, you have to read it. You have to
But I've
read
heard
it.
a lot about it.
Okay. So I guess people call it a parenting book, but I would think that it's more of like a cultural book, basically talking about how French moms raise their kids. And the author is an American journalist who raises her baby in France, and she discovers that French kids are actually really well behaved, very independent. Meanwhile, the parents are very relaxed and happy and chic.
That
right?
sounds perfect.
Yeah.
That's the kind of life that I'd love to have.
Yeah, that was a guidebook for me. When I was pregnant with my first child, I read that book and I thought, this is who I'm going to be. When I have my child, I'll be this chic. I will just love my life and be guilt-free about sending my kids off to kindergarten or daycare. But it's just not been the case.
Yeah,
It's really different to what I thought.
It's hard, but yeah, very, very fun and inspirational book. Some examples from the book I'll just briefly mention. The first is the author talks about how feeding children is very different for French parents. She found that American kids and even Canadian kids are quite picky when it comes to food. So if you go to a typical family restaurant, the kids menu will often have pizza, hamburger, fries, chicken fingers,
Yes.
mac and cheese,
Always.
very little vegetables, and even in like American movies, you see kids hating on vegetables, like
Yes.
Inside Out.
Right.
Yeah.
The girl Riley, she's like anti-broccoli, whereas French kids are very welcoming when it comes to different types of vegetables, different types of flavors, and yeah, just French parents don't seem to have a hard time feeding their kids.
Yeah, and that's just so different to the reality of, well, in my case, I have 2 kids. I go to a restaurant, I expect them to behave and eat the food, and I love food, and I'm very experimental, so I'll try everything. And I remember that book where it says, make your kids try everything at least 3 times, and then they will get to like it, because everything is sort of an acquired taste.
Yeah.
I try that on my kids, but the first time they'll go, no, and I don't know what to do. Like, okay.
Especially if you've also spent hours cooking that meal for them, right?
Yeah.
That's basically the French philosophy, which is if you feed your child something enough times, they will eventually like it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I do agree. But the thing with me is that I guess I'm sort of a typical Canadian. I was a typical Canadian child where I loved pizza.
Yeah.
I loved hamburgers. I loved all of that stuff. So I know for a fact that if I give these foods to my child, he will eat it well. He will eat it all. And so there's a tendency to provide these foods to these children so that they would eat it quickly and eat the food well, right?
Right.
So I'm sort of guilty of that. But we all know that Korean cuisine is also, it's very healthy. And so there are a lot of vegetables and fermented foods and stuff like that. So we try to sort of half and half, right? Include both of those types of meals.
Another example in the book, which I thought was really interesting, was she talks about French couples in comparison to American couples. So oftentimes for American parents, they feel like once they have kids, they need to sacrifice everything for the kids. Kids are first and foremost above everything else, including career, social life, sex life, everything. And she found that with French parents, they really don't feel guilty about making time for themselves, and sometimes actually detaching themselves from their children. They find identity beyond their kids, which is really interesting.
I really think that's important, and I think that's very difficult to do. I mean, we read about that all the time, how it's important for mothers to, take some time off, go away with some girlfriends for a weekend, and just be yourself, right? Because we're just, every single day, it's, you're looking after the children, you're just exhausted, so you don't have time to take care of yourself. But I find that, I need to learn. How do they do that, right? Like, are you going to be telling us today how?
No, you got to read the book. You got to read the book.
All right.
So today I thought that maybe we can do our own version of bringing up Bebe. We can maybe call it bringing up Aga.
Sounds great.
And just talk about how the Korean mom is different from every other mom, and maybe we can try and define her. Yeah. So let's maybe start off with our mom. So our mother, and how she raised us. I feel like when I think of my mom, I think just very, very strong, very resilient, and also sacrificing her whole life for my brother and I. Do you think that for the modern Korean mom, like moms like us, we can say the same thing?
Not really. I don't think I'm, in the traditional sense, sacrificing my life for my kids. It's still an ongoing dilemma, but in the past I would never imagine my mum having a job while I was quite young. She was always at home, so whenever I went home she would be there. That was just a given. But with my kids, it will often be the case where I'm either not home, and so their grandparents will be home, or someone else is home to pick them up and things like that. And I felt so guilty about that at first because I had not been raised like that. But then I did try it for a while. I just stayed at home, quit everything, and it made me miserable. And I didn't want my kids to see a miserable mum. So then I started doing what I loved doing. And then I found that although I was spending less time with them, and in a way not sacrificing myself, I was happier. So it was, I found my own way of being a happy mum, and I think it's better to show them a sort of a healthy, happy mother, even if it's for a shorter amount of time, than like someone who's miserable all day, all the time.
I agree. I think when you think of the typical Korean mother, especially as immigrants in Canada or in England, they work so hard, right? They work so hard for the family, for the kids, to give these children a better life. And so it's almost like the mother themselves is non-existent. They almost don't even they don't use their first name, right? Everyone calls them mom or wife or so-and-so. And it's a little sad, right? I don't think I could ever be that mom. Maybe because, I don't know, I don't think I have that sort of attitude towards, I love my child, but I don't know if I could sacrifice everything for my child, right? Because I do have a life, I work, I have commitments, and the child is a priority, but there are other things that, that also need to get done and that I want to do to make myself happy as well.
It's interesting you mentioned names, because I've never called my mother's by her first name, obviously, but there's been no opportunity for me to ever say her name for any particular reason, right? Apart from when I'm writing it.
Right, hear her name. Like you probably never
that's
hear
true
your
as well.
mother's name
Yeah.
either.
Yeah, that's so true. But with my kids, I deliberately told them, my name is Sujin, that's my Korean name. And so my kids will sometimes say Sujin, and of course I'll correct them and say, you don't call your mum that. But I'm fine with it. I don't feel like that's a strange thing. I like them to know what my name is. And when someone else calls my name, then I want them to know who that person is. So it's definitely been a bit of a shift, I think, in terms of character building for mothers.
I agree with you. What about how, talking on top of that, what about how Korean moms communicate with their kids? Do you think that the way they communicate with their kids is different from Western parents?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't realize it until recently when my 3-year-old's teacher at daycare said that at the end of the weekend, well, on Mondays, basically, they would talk about what they did over the weekend. And most kids would just describe what they did. But the teacher said, my son always puts in an emotion. He would say, oh, I had a happy weekend, and it was, and so she said, this is quite different to all of the other kids, because they usually say, I went to this place, I ate this, and just the facts. So I think I like to add emotion and talk about each other's emotions. I tell my kids how I feel. I like them to tell me how they feel. I didn't have that much when I was growing up. But I deliberately do that, and I guess not many typical Korean mums do that.
I think feelings are not so important in the Korean household, as sad as it sounds, but I think it's true. I don't think I really talked about feelings with my parents either, and definitely because my husband is very Korean, I noticed that he doesn't talk about feelings much with our kids either. Yeah.
I mean, I'd have to agree, like with my mother as well. We always sort of expressed our feelings, but I don't really remember her ever saying that she was really sad or that she was lonely or really upset or angry about something. It was always sort of contained, I think. I mean, when I was younger, I don't think I had sort of the maturity to notice things like that or to ask. But even as a teenager, she could have, had these conversations with me about how she feels. But I don't ever remember that happening. Also, I mean, with her friends, and I don't remember her going out with her friends. We go out for dinner, we go out for drinks and stuff like that once in a while. But I don't ever remember her doing that or having friends come over. So, I mean, with the children, there was very little communication in terms of emotions. But I think that's sort of the way they were raised, perhaps.
Yeah, and also that's another part of sacrificing, I think, because they communicate everything that has to do with our needs, so the children's needs, and not so much her own needs. Now I think for the modern Korean mom, maybe they do still communicate a bit of feelings, but again, I think it's heavily based on the child.
I think you're right, yeah. I mean, like, I communicate my feelings with my child a lot. If I'm angry, I say that I'm angry right now because, and so I need a little bit of time alone, and then in 10 minutes, then we'll play, right? We also acknowledge their feelings, right? Oh, it looks like you're upset right now because of this, and so, why don't you come here, I'll give you a hug, right? And then we'll just talk about it and try to make the child feel better. But there was like very little of that. And I think mothers these days are more aware of just the importance of expressing your emotions, right? And also letting your child know that you're there for them. Home is a safe place where you can be whoever you are and we'll accept you for that. When we were growing up, I think especially as immigrant children, there was a lot of pressure to sort of succeed academically and not to disappoint your parents just because we know all the hardships that they go through by not speaking the language, being in a different culture, being far away from relatives and their families. So we're in the back of our minds, we're also always thinking about stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Here's another question. Do you think, I mean, oftentimes when you think of tiger moms, especially in the media, you think the Chinese mom or Chinese dad. Do you think that Korean moms are tiger moms?
They can be.
Yeah.
I know my mum was
definitely-
kind of a tiger mom.
Definitely yes.
Okay, not even can be, but yes, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
How was she like as a tiger mom?
I mean, so growing up, I always thought my mother was someone I needed to please. That was her role in my life. And so it helped for me to advance academically. But then when I had things on my mind that I wanted to discuss, you know, if I had a fallout with a friend or if I was going through some sort of physical change, I didn't really know how to address this issue with my mother. And I thought, oh, maybe this is not going to please her, it's going to upset her, and it's, you know, things like that. So in that sense, I think my mum was a bit of a tiger mum. And she was very strict on how you had to do well in every aspect of life and be very polite. And so yeah, my mum was a tiger mum. I see the benefits of it growing up, but you know, there were some times when I wished she was a bit softer.
Yeah,
you know? And so
and of course academics is so important for Korean mothers.
And so now, as a mother myself, I'm trying to balance out being this soft, sort of friendly mother, but at the same time, I do still want my kids to do well in life.
Yeah.
And so there has to be an element of a tiger mother, I think, in me.
Right, and if you're sort of brought up that way, right, that's sort of how you are going to raise your child instinctively. And so for myself as well, like my mother, the standards are always very high, right? And there was always certain things you had to do, usually based on like studying or playing the piano and things like that, before you can go on and relax and enjoy your evening, right? And so you're sort of used to that, and you take that into your adult life, and when you work, you kind of have that same attitude as well, which, like you said, is very helpful. But then as a mother, it's all about balance, right? So you want your child to do well in school. I don't think there are any parents in this world who don't want their children to succeed in school. But it's sort of trying to sort of be authoritarian, like just be very authoritative about things like that, and making it very strict. And it's like you have to, not because you're good at it, but because you just have to, right? That's what success is.
Right.
And so I find that it's a struggle, I think, for myself, to try to balance those two things.
I definitely feel like it's sort of innate in me, the tiger mom. But again, I really try hard to really think about my children's feelings and really allow them to feel comfortable to communicate their feelings to both my husband and I. But yeah.
It's easier said than done, because for myself as a teacher, I've been teaching children and adults for such a long time, and you're so much more easygoing and so much more lax with other people's children, right? And I feel like I should do the same for my own child, but then the level of expectation is so different. And it's all based on my standards as an adult, right? When this child is only 5 years old, only 6 years old, I mean, there's only so much they can comprehend and take in at one time. And we're holding these adult standards up to these children and thinking about, you know, when they're 20, when they're 25 years old, when every single day actually is what we should be grateful for. But that's quite tough.
Do you think that's the Korean side of you? You know, being strict?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I think it comes from my parents, right?
Okay, do you think that Korean moms are helicopter moms? Now, maybe some of you don't know the term helicopter mom, but basically it's somebody who is a parent who pays very close attention to their children almost at all times, but in particular when it comes to their education, and they're sort of just hovering around their kids all the time, hence the name helicopter mom.
Right.
Yeah.
They also swoop in, right, when there's a problem to solve the problem. So they're close by, so that if there's a problem, they're going to dive right in and, you know, pretty much try to solve it as quickly as possible, so that the child's not suffering or losing out or wasting any time from dealing with these unnecessary issues, right?
Which is swoop in.
Right. But I feel like that's very dangerous. Right? It's not preparing children for the real world where you are going to experience disappointment. You are going to experience heartbreak. You know, you're going to have things that definitely are not going to go your way, but your mom's not going to be there.
Right.
But I do have experience while teaching at a university where a couple parents have called after the grades have gone out, and they asked me if their child could have another chance to, rewrite the exam or submit another essay, so that they could raise their grade, their GPA. And I was shocked.
Yeah, I'm shocked hearing it now.
I mean, even in elementary school, if there's a big problem, the parents will be asked to come in, but usually they don't come in themselves and say, like, this is in Canada, I'm talking about, but come in themselves and say, I want this for my kid, can you give this child a second chance, and things like that, because that's all part of the learning experience, right? It's not only what's on paper and what's black and white that teaches a child, right? But when I have had a couple of parents ask me, and I had to flat out say no. And tell them why. I said, your child is 20, 22. They should have asked me themselves, number one. Right? Number two, they should have asked me right away. Or if they had an issue or a problem, things happen in life, right? Then you can email me, talk to me ahead of time. But you don't wait it all out until the end and then go home and cry, and then the mom will be like, oh, you know what, I'll call the professor, and they might say yes. So I always refuse.
Yeah, I think Korean moms are pretty good at that. They're very good at sheltering their children and swooping in to any problems. I mean, my kids are quite young, but I definitely see that even going to kids' cafes. If ever there's sort of a squabble between the kids, before the moms even let the kids resolve it themselves, they come in and they try to solve the problem and say, okay, you need to say sorry to this person, and this person needs to say sorry for this, and it's always this sort of who needs to say sorry, everybody needs to say sorry, okay, and then the fire is out, now you guys can go play.
Yeah, I think that's also true with homework. My kids aren't old enough to do homework, but I have friends who have older kids, and I find that sometimes the parent will do the homework for their kids sometimes. Because it's faster, it's time efficient, especially if you're in elementary school and the parent is able to do it. If you get, at a higher level, of course, the parent wouldn't be able to do that. But I've seen that happen, and I think that's just so bad for the child because they're not able to spend that time, think about the question. And yet I also understand where the frustration of the parent is coming from, because it's really hard to sit back and watch your kid spend minutes, maybe hours, over a really easy question. And as a parent, I learned that probably one of the most important factors or things to have as a parent is patience. And it's so difficult, but you have to sort of let your child be and be patient, sit back, even when they're doing the simplest and tiniest of tasks. And I see a lot of Korean parents sometimes not able to do that, and I'll do it for you,
Oh yeah, that's definitely innate in me too. I'm impatient by nature. But
me too,
very, very patient.
Right, and we're working on adult time, right? Not children's time, right? So it's also very different. And I also feel like with the patience thing, it's, the kids need to experience failure. That's one of the most important things to experience growing up. When there's little failures as you grow up, that's fine, because they're not things that are going to be detrimental to your success or your upbringing. But the more you try to protect your children from experiencing these failures, the less prepared they are to go out into the real world where, it's failure after failure. It's hard, right? It really is hard, because it's not just you and your family. You're dealing with tons of people, and with social media these days, and with all of that, you have you're interacting with so many different people, and things never go your way, right? Life is tough, and so when they're little, I think giving them that freedom to explore and to fail and talk about things like that, I think that's crucial.
This sort of funny. I have a funny story. So my son goes to an international school, and they once had this project that they had to do, and the teacher displayed all the projects up on a wall, and you can tell which kids were the Korean kids and which kids were the foreign kids, because the projects that were like super fancy and just really nice, they were all the Korean kids. And with the foreign kids, you could tell that the parents just really let them do their own thing. And whether it came out crappy or not, it's what you just give them a chance to do it. But yeah, Korean moms, that's another big trait.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I find myself catching myself from commenting about what my son is actually doing. So I do give him the freedom, like if they have to draw something for homework, then he'll be drawing it. But then I want to say, like, why don't you use a little more color? Or why don't you try to color inside the lines, right? But things like that, that's exactly what helicopter parenting is. I think, like making comments on every single little thing so that they'll do it according to what we see as fit for how we think it should be done, right? So it's like, watching and being there, but really holding back on making these little comments that eventually build up. If they're so used to mom commenting on everything, then they're going to eventually always seek approval, right? And if you don't have that approval, you're uncertain and there's no self-confidence, right? So that's one area that I think, one area I really try to be careful with.
And it's hard because you watch them do their homework or work on a project and you're kind of back there like itching to say something or make a comment about it.
It's horrible. And all the spelling is wrong, but you're like, I keep telling myself, especially as a teacher, like that's how they learn. I know that. I'm trained in this field, but I want to say it so badly.
Yes.
But I really do have to hold myself back.
So when I was talking about bringing up Bébé, I mentioned about how French parents are very different when it comes to feeding their kids. Do you think that there's any special traits about Korean moms where they feed their children a little bit differently than other moms?
I think especially when my kids were newborns, other mums, they would, in my eyes, spend so much time and put in so much effort in their food that I would be made to feel I would feel really guilty because of some of the food I made, or sometimes I would just buy food. It's not processed food or anything bad, because I wouldn't do that for my kids. But they have services these days where they make foods for you on the day of, and you can get it delivered just an hour after it's been made. So it's basically like having your own chef.
Oh, you got to give me that number.
Well, you don't have any newborns. So, when they're really young, you have to chop everything, slice everything, and mince everything. It's a lot of work, and it's just tiny portions as well. So I was so stressed over that. And my two kids, they're quite close in age, so I had to prepare 2 different types of meals, and it was just too much for me. And so I made use of these services, and other mums would look at me like I was feeding them McDonald's or something. And, like you didn't make that yourself. You didn't spend 6 hours preparing that yourself. And I said, well, someone else spent 6 hours, and can't I just pay them to? And so there was that with the food, and so I was made to feel really guilty. And then I did, of course, make some of my own food as well. Not that bad of a mum. I did make some homemade food for my kids. But the thing is, both my kids were born premature. So now, when you see them, they're quite short compared to their peers. And one of the first comments any mum, Korean, typical mum will say is, do they get fed properly? And when I hear that, I feel just like the worst mother on the planet. And I hate that. Although I know they mean well. And they're like, maybe we could help you, or what, is there something wrong with but every time I get that by a new mum or someone that I've just met, I'll just feel really bad.
Koreans in general are pretty quick to judge when it comes to appearances, right? So they always, it's a common thing to say, oh, is your child average when it comes to their height, or are they above average, are they below average? Your daughter looks quite tall. Is she above average? It's very common.
I think that's common until they start comparing academic grades. So before the academic grades comes like the physical, the
because there's nothing else to compare, really.
But I do feel like Korean parents and grandparents, they like chubby babies, right?
Yeah.
So my son was pretty skinny, and so they'd be like, oh my gosh, he's so skinny, he needs to feed him, buy some more beef, feed him and things like that.
Right, that's not as bad as is your breast milk coming out. I would get that as well. Oh my goodness, do you know me well enough to ask me this question?
Right, but it's very common, and it's like a general concern for everyone to see that this child, it's not your child, but this child is eating well, and that this child is growing properly.
And that's the thing, Korean moms are extremely passionate about feeding their kids.
I think that's something to learn from, actually, because I do want to be like that. I'm not able to.
Yeah.
I'd have to say I'm one of those crazy moms
Okay.
when it comes to food.
Yeah, that's good.
My mother was a little bit like that, but I don't necessarily take it after my mom, but sort of like a lifestyle that I've adopted, like a standard for myself, right? So then I try to, you know, instill these good eating habits and how to make good, healthy choices for food when it comes to my child. And I also really do believe that, just being in the classroom for such a long time, that when you eat well, you know, you concentrate better, right? When you concentrate better, then you release that energy in a positive way. And then you go home and you sleep better, right? And in turn, you're growing more. And so I think that food is the thing that starts it all, right? So if you eat healthy, you eat at the right times, that it really does affect a child's growth.
Oh, it's so important. But one of the, I guess, cultural differences is when I was feeding my kids when they were babies, I would try to get them to eat on their own. So even if they make a mess, you know, just let them discover different tastes, and if they don't like it, they don't like it, and I'll try to reintroduce it later. But then if my mother-in-law is ever around, she will just let my children play, and she'll just follow them around everywhere with the spoon and bowl until, you know, the bowl is completely clean.
Even if it takes 2 hours,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That I don't agree with, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, but it really does depend. If your child's a good eater, you can't complain. I mean, that's one of, when you talk to
can't
Korean,
complain.
Yeah, I thought like you, but I ended up being like the mother that follows the kid around because my kid wouldn't eat.
Right. That's why you can't judge, right? When it comes to each child, I mean, there's kids that eat well, kids that really don't eat anything. But in, like, you know, in North America, a lot of times we're like, if they don't eat, they're not going to die.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So if they want another peanut butter and jelly sandwich today, the fifth one for the day, just give it to them. You know, if all they want are French fries and nuggets, just give them French fries and nuggets, because that's all they need. But Korean parents, oh, that would never fly, right? Like they would not be okay with that. It would, you know, they would lose sleep over that for sure.
And every morning has to be rice. If you're feeding your kids bread, it's just you're feeding them, you know, junk food.
Right.
That's how they think of it.
Yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, my sister and I, we were so jealous of friends who were allowed to bring PB&J sandwiches to school for lunch. My mother would be like, that is not a lunch. That's a snack. Right? So she's like, you can have one after dinner for dessert, but you can't take one to school for lunch. So I would take my sandwiches or like my warm lunches and swap them with my friends who would bring just these delicious plain sandwiches. But I mean, even just for lunch, when you take a look at schools, here in Korea, most kids are given lunch at school, right?
Right.
Yeah. But when they pack something for picnics and stuff like that, they really do pack so much food, and not just food for yourself, but food for like your friends and food for the teachers, and they all share. That's pretty discouraged. That's kind of discouraged back in Toronto, especially with allergies and kids having different, you know, restrictions, dietary restrictions. And so, it's very different.
That's very true for even foreign schools or international schools here in Korea. If ever you send a snack with your child, it's very much discouraged that they share that snack with anybody else. Whereas if you know, my daughter goes to a Korean daycare right now, and if I send a snack, I always send a snack for everybody in the class, along with the teachers, and everybody just shares, and the other moms do the same thing, and you know, sharing is a big part in Korean culture.
Yes, for sure. I think that's very evident in play dates. So if you've ever had play dates, I'm sure you've had them in Korea, and outside of Korea or with foreign moms, it's very different because from my experience, when you have play dates with non-Korean moms, usually you bring your child's water bottle and a small snack, and when each child, doesn't matter, like on their own time, when they're hungry, they will just have it, and that child will have theirs when it's their turn, right, or whenever they feel like having it. But when you have a play date with Korean kids, there's lots of food on the table. You have tteok, like rice cakes, you have fruit. This is like, you know,
it's like children's buffet.
Right, exactly. And kids will come and go, and they'll be eating it, and then you'll have coffee for the parents and whoever's there. So this sharing of food when you get together, especially with kids, is just, it's very common. Back in Toronto, it's like when we have play dates, is everyone brings their own stuff, and then sometimes some moms will put out some water, some juice boxes, and maybe some cookies, and that's it. And if you're, hanging out for 1 hour, you play for 1 hour, then you go home. But in Korea, oftentimes it leads to dinner.
Yeah.
So then you order pizza and chicken.
Right.
And then, you bust out some beers. And then you almost sleep over. You pretty much all the kids get into pajamas, and then you eat more. And it's just like this sharing of food is, I think it's lovely. I mean, I do really like that.
And you often see Korean moms always kind of offering food to the other kids and making sure everybody's well fed.
Right.
So it's so important.
Yes, definitely.
Even within our own small knit family, because my husband is Korean, we had that sort of conflict at first, because my husband really strongly believes in communal dining and everything has to be shared, and I was a bit more individualistic, and so we would have disagreements regarding that at first. Now we've come to terms with what we both like, and I also agree that it's nice to share. There's something you learn from that as well, so it's all good. But at first, there were some difficulties.
Yeah, it just reminded me of like my mother and I. We still argue to this day because, now I'm a full-grown adult, right?
Yeah.
But whenever we eat together, she's constantly putting stuff on my plate, right? And I've already told her that no, thank you, I don't want it.
My mother-in-law does that to my husband all the time.
Oh my gosh, she keeps putting it, and sometimes it's like already half eaten. Like she's eaten some of it, and she's like, "This is really good," and then she'll put it on my plate. I'm like,
it's an affectionate thing, but
and I have my set portion of what I want to have, and then I catch myself doing that to my son as well. So I think it's just like a motherly love. I mean, you're just expressing your love like that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's talk about academics. How are Korean moms different when it comes to educating their kids?
I think
Where do we start?
We need a couple of days for that.
I mean, again, my kids are quite young, so they're not in school yet, 5 and 3. But I found that there's a lot more comparing. So with the Korean moms that I've met, it's important that my kid is better than everyone else's kid. That's sort of the rule of thumb. Although I personally think for me it would be more important for my kids to do well on their own sort of time track and be good at what they're good at. And if they're not good at something, then it's okay, I think. But there's just a lot more comparing, I think.
Yeah, and it's a huge stress on the child.
Oh yeah, and the parent too.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to, I guess, in order for your child to be successful academically, you do have to pressure your child a lot, right? You have to set the standard very high, and the pressure is going to constantly be there because when you're a student, you're always a student.
Yeah.
It's not like you're at a job where you go home at 6 and then you don't have to think about work. I mean, if you own your own business, it's a different story. But I mean, in most cases, if you work a 9-to-5 job, when you go home, you do relax. But when you're a student around the clock. So that means that the mom, they call them these days so-called managers, right? Like a road manager for a celebrity. So there's like concert manager, road manager. But these moms have become managers where they are really like scheduling their children's day down to like every 30 minutes as to what they need to do to study academically and to do well. But I feel like, it's hard to blame them. I mean, Korea, Korea is a country where there's very little natural resources, right? So, I mean, academics are very important. It's sort of like academic success is sort of like the way to, I guess, change your position in a socioeconomic way, right? And so without that, they feel that life would be very difficult.
Right.
So everyone's competing for the same thing, right? In Toronto, a lot of the comparison comes from like, when did your kid start hockey, right? Like, my son started skating at 3, or like we started at 3 and a half. And so a lot of it's based on sports, right? But we don't really say like, does your son read? Does he know how to read? Does he speak Mandarin and Korean and English? But here, there's a lot of comparison.
I mean, even with subjects, growing up in England, it was always about what subject do you like or what you're good at, and I just compared other subjects that I was good at or bad at to myself. But then as soon as I came back to Korea, and I went to high school here, so it was a really tough time, but it was all about how good I was compared to my peers, and I had never really felt that before growing up in England. I wasn't going to school to beat everyone else. It was just to excel in whatever I was good at doing and finding my path. So I found that, and I see that with my kids and their friends, and even if it doesn't have to even go to kids' parents, But the kids themselves, I think, feel that. And sometimes I think my kids feel that too. They want to do better than other kids. I mean, I always try to tell them, it doesn't really matter if you're worse than your friend at skipping or whatever. And they'll say, no, I want to beat them, I want to be better than them. And so I see that, even though I teach them the opposite. So I guess it's ingrained in the society.
It is ingrained in their brains as well from a very young age that they need to be good at whatever they do. And so, I mean, there's pros and cons to it for sure.
So Sue and I raised our kids completely in Korea, right?
Yes.
Rowan went to school for a few years in Toronto and then a few years in Korea. Any differences in terms of the attitude of the parents or even the teachers maybe?
Right. I feel like the parents, they really don't concern themselves with academics. So they're not worried if their child is not spelling it in Canada. So if they're not spelling it, that's okay. If they can't read and they're in first grade, that's okay because they will eventually get there. And that's sort of the attitude, I think, sort of the North American attitude, right? And that is often criticized as well. Because a lot of it is always about, oh, you did a good job, great job. And if you don't do a good job, maybe math isn't your thing, and that's okay because you'll be good at something else, right? But there certainly needs to be a set standard and a little bit of a push because kids, I feel, perform better when there is a little bit of pressure. But if it's all the time, every day, from every adult that you know, then I think that would be unbearable. So that's one of the main things I found, that parents don't concern, that they're not too worried about their children's academic development or advancement. They also don't really compare when it comes to things like that, and they wholly trust the teacher and the school system, pretty much, which is very important, right? You're sending your child to school, then it's up to the teacher, and you give the children emotional support at home, good habits, right? And you have routines, and those are the things that families pretty much are working on at home for the child, rather than being a helicopter parent and making sure they're doing their homework every night and stuff like that.
So you have the Canadian parents who wholeheartedly trust the education system there, and then on the opposite spectrum here in Korea, you have the parents where you have Korean moms who are, if their child comes home with a bad grade, it's not really the child's fault. It's there's something wrong with the system. There's something wrong with the teacher.
Oftentimes there tends to be some blame in that sense. And also, I've noticed that a lot of parents, even of kids who are like maybe 5 or 6 years old, they don't even trust themselves to teach this child math. It's for kindergarten, right? So you definitely can teach your kid to add 3 plus 2, but you want to find another knowledgeable person that could teach it better than you as a mom, right? And so that there's that dependence, or sort of leaning towards someone to really give your child that extra help and that boost. And oftentimes they feel it's not coming from school, public schools especially, which is a big problem, I think, to be honest.
I agree.
On the flip side, though, I suppose Korean mums do give children more opportunities to experience this and that in terms of academics or just other extracurricular stuff in general. So if you look at it from a very positive light, then you could say that Korean kids are exposed to more things that they can do, try this and that, meet different teachers, things like that.
Oh, that is true.
And there's definitely a lot more services available in Korea that allows you to, pick and choose whichever one, hagwons, right?
Right.
If you don't like this hagwon, you move to the next hagwon.
It's true.
Okay, so just to end off, any things that are sort of admirable about the Korean mom? What do you think is kind of something good about Korean moms?
I think Korean moms are great at sort of making other children, sort of taking care of other, like, friends' children as well. Right?
The tongue.
Right. And so I can, at almost any time be like, Serena, can you pick my son up and just, watch him for a couple of hours? It's not so difficult to ask for something like that. Whereas in Canada, I would probably be looking for a babysitting service, right? And just find a babysitter to come watch my kid for a couple of hours, because I don't really want to impose on someone else. But here, I don't feel bad asking for that. And also, I feel okay. Anytime, you can drop your child off with me anytime. And if he comes with me, I'll make sure that he eats, right? I'll make sure that if there's things things to get done, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I've really met quite a few great, like a lot of really, really generous moms who have been always like so kind, you know, so ready to help. And so I really love that about being here and being surrounded by Korean moms all the time.
Yeah. I think borderline sacrificial, the sort of attitude mums have and how they adjust really well to becoming a mum in Korea. You know, first of all, their names change. You know, once you become a mum, you're not Sue anymore, you're someone's mum. You know, 누구 엄마, you know, in Korean. And for me, that was really hard to accept, maybe because I have like half English mentality, but a lot of the Korean mums that I've seen adjust to that really well. And I find that quite admirable because it's a really hard thing to do, you know, and then they dedicate their time and almost their life almost. I don't want to say it's totally sacrificial, but they adjust to this new lifestyle as someone's mum. Much better, I think, than someone like me who wants to stay as an individual who isn't someone's mum. Yeah, exactly. So that's quite admirable.
Another thing that I find admirable about Korean moms is how resourceful they are and how they do a lot of things with intention, and I don't mean in a bad way, but a lot of times when you have these play dates, the moms want to know information about where to send their kids, or you know, who the best teachers are, or you know, they want to get information out of other moms. So they're very good at that. They're very good at researching
and sharing.
And sharing, yeah. They're also very good at sharing the information.
I find so too. Like if I need something, if I want something, they're like, oh, you know, check out this place, check out that place, and they really have a whole list of things that they recommend, which is great because I don't have to. I mean, being working moms, we know how busy it is, right? But if you have someone who has done that and they so readily share it with you, I mean, you're just so grateful for that.
And they're very straight to the point with those kinds of things. Like I could send a mom a message and be like, oh, you know, I'm looking for a place to teach my kids swimming. Do you know any good places? And then the mom will write back with a list of places that she sent her kids to, and all the teachers, all the specific teacher names that the kid learned swimming from. And they're very, very informative.
I agree.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today and just talking about the Korean mom. I had so much fun. I hope you guys come back. I feel like we can talk hours on everything related to parenting. So it is the holidays. Do you guys have anything special planned?
I think we're going to try to visit some Christmas markets
that
are going on the weekends. There's quite a few of them in the month of December. And in the New Year as well, they have different markets going on.
What do they have at the Christmas market?
So they have like Christmas goodies. You can't have a Christmas market without Christmas goodies. Christmas decorations, and then like, you know, drinks and things like that. So just really festive. I really miss Christmas back in Canada. So it's a little different. And so like visiting these festivals really does help, you know, make me a little happier when it comes to the holiday season for sure.
I'm sure. How about you, Sue?
I think I'll probably be going to Jeju because my husband lives there.
Oh, okay.
And so we live apart, you know, for the most part of the week, and we don't see each other that much. So kids will be quite excited to spend some quality time with Dad.
That would be lovely.
As will I.
I wanted to ask you guys if you guys have any favorite product or service that you have really loved in 2018, something that's been, you know, just very helpful in your lives, maybe as a mom.
Sure. For me, I've discovered the Instant Pot.
Oh, what's
Do you have
that?
one of those?
What's that?
So it's like a pressure cooker, but it's programmable. So there's all these different program settings on it. So you can cook stuff on high pressure. You can do beans and porridge and all sorts of things. And it's so easy, right? So there's a whole bunch of recipes online, and a lot of one pot meals. So you throw everything in there, and you let it cook, and then you have a meal.
That sounds like something.
That sounds like my kind of cooking for everything.
I find that Korean food is, you know, particularly great. Like my son loves chup. right? Like patju, like red bean porridge and
sounds
things
good
like
right
that.
now.
And I love chili. So in the winter, I make like huge pots of chili and just eat it for months. And so, but I mean, like soaking the beans.
Make it once and eat it for months.
I do freeze portions, right? And make different types of chilies and stews.
Yeah.
But if you're making that with just a regular oven or a regular stove, it just takes a long, long time.
Yeah.
But you don't even have to soak beans. You can, but you don't even have to. And it just cuts your workload down so much. And I just love it. I don't think I can live without it anymore.
Sounds amazing.
You ladies should definitely check
I will
out.
look into that.
Me too.
How about you, Sue? Any favorite product or service?
My kids have been making use of this audio pen device thing. So you can, instead of I loved reading books for my kids, and I will when I can, but sometimes I have to do the laundry and the cooking, and then I just don't have time to read books at the same time simultaneously. So this pen will do the job for them. They put the pen on a book, obviously they all come together, and then it reads the book for them.
Yeah.
So they have like a
We have two of those. Actually.
Okay, so I find that great for when I'm not able to be there for them and I just have other household chores to do. That's been great for me.
Oh yeah, audiobooks are great for kids, and Korea is so good at coming up with those clever devices. Yeah. So my favorite thing this year has been actually skincare products that I'm going to I've prepared 2 sets for you guys.
Oh,
So
wow.
This one's for you,
Thank
and this one's
you.
for you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to actually just use yours to open it up. But it was featured in my November favorites for my channel, and it's by a brand called Bonaire. They are known for their fermented oils. So when they ferment the oil, it just absorbs better into your skin, and it's and I feel like my skin is so dry during the winter months that this has been so helpful. It's one of my favorite products, and so this is the face oil that you put on after toner, and this is the cream. They call it the Blue Smoother Velvet Cream.
Wow, thank you. So if Sue and I use this, we're gonna have beautiful skin like
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.
Yes, you guys both have beautiful skin anyway.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming out. Enjoy your holidays, and yeah, hopefully we'll be back for another episode where we sit down and talk about something fun. Yeah, and thank you guys for tuning into this series. I hope you guys really liked it. If you did, show us some love by subscribing to the channel. And if you have any recommendations on topics that you'd like us to talk about, leave the comments down below. As always, thank you so much for supporting the channel. Have yourselves a lovely holiday, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye for now. Annyeong!
Bye.